Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Although Halloween's over, there was a weekend last month where I did not have the opportunity to upload a video. And because of this, it prevented me from being able to review all of the Halloween-themed books that I had read for that holiday. So for this reason, I'm expanding October out for one more weekend so I can go in and wrap up the Halloween books that I read for 2020. Now, before I get started, the book I'm reviewing this weekend is called Halloween Horrors, and this is an anthology that was composed by Richard Chizmar and Robert Morris. And truth be it, I've had this book for years, and I honestly don't know why I hadn't read it sooner. However, this year I was hanging out in a horror group on Facebook, and I noticed where these two really cool people by the name of Rob and Brandy were talking about reading this as a buddy read for Rob's birthday. Well, one thing led to another, and they allowed me to join in on their buddy read, which I would like to use this opportunity to say thank you to Rob and Brandy for including me. I had a great time doing this. Also, I would like to just say I hope y'all had a great Halloween, and also happy belated birthday to Rob. But without me rambling on anymore, let's go in and get down to the book review and find out what kind of horrors can happen on Halloween. Halloween Horrors is an anthology that was also released under the name October Dreams, and this was composed by Richard Chizmar and Robert Morris. Now, with this book, we have over 20 short stories, poems, and essays that regard the holiday. And because of this, we have stories that range from creepy to grotesque, and others that go from literature to pulp fiction. Also, among the authors who contributed to this book, we see a pretty good diversity as well. Like, we have Jack Ketchum, Poppy Z. Bright, Peter Straub, Richard Lehman, Ray Bradbury, and the list continues. So, overall, this is a pretty good mix of nightmarish goodies for Halloween. Since Halloween Horrors is an anthology, I'm going to share insight on my top 3 favorite stories and their authors. For starters, Gone by Jack Ketchum first appeared in October Dreams, where it won the Bram Stoker Award for Best Short Fiction. It was later reprinted in Ketchum's short story collection, Peaceable Kingdom. In the book To Each Their Darkness, author Gary A. Braunbeck explains 1/3 of Ketchum's fans are wary of Gone because they don't understand its ending. And next, since I was unable to find information on Boo by Richard Lehman, except that the story was first published in October Dreams, here's some insight on the author. Spanning Lehman's career, he wrote over 60 short stories and over 30 novels. Among these titles, a few books were released under the pseudonym Richard Kelly. While Lehman didn't receive the stardom like King or Kuntz did in America, he had greater success in the United Kingdom. And last, Eyes by Charles L. Grant was first published in Halloween Horrors, which was an anthology composed by Alan Ryan. While I wasn't able to find any additional information on this story, I learned that Grant specialized in a subgenre called quiet horror. Among his many accomplishments from 1987 through 1988, Grant served as president of the Horror Writers Association. Fun facts! Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find out too much about this book or why it underwent a name change, so please forgive me for being short in this segment. Halloween Horrors was first published under the title October Dreams by Cemetery Dance in 2000. Then, in 2010, October Dreams was renamed to Halloween Horrors and was published through Fall River Press. Now that we have that out of the way, it's time to move on to the spoiler section of this video, which this is where I'm going to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you if you've never read this book before. And if you would like to skip this section, all you have to do is scroll down to the comments section of this video, and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top where if you click on that timestamp, it will redirect you from this segment to the thoughts chapter of the video. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go! Since everyone has had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about three of my favorite stories, which the first one that comes to mind is called Gone by Jack Ketchum. Now, this is about a woman by the name of Helen, and we discover about 5 years prior to this story taking place that her 3-year-old daughter by the name of Alice had been abducted. And since no one ever saw or heard from Alice ever again, this caused Helen to go into a deep depression where she cut herself off from society. Well, after all of these years of being in seclusion, she decides that she would like to reconnect with the public. So what she does is she gets a bag of trick-or-treat candy to pass out to the kids for Halloween. And of course, because of her being in seclusion for this amount of time, no one comes to her home except one group of kids. And this is like just 3 kids. But even though it's a small group, she's excited to see them, so Helen gives them all of her candy, and in the process of doing so, one of the kids asks her, "Hey, you're that lady who lost her child all those years ago, aren't you?" And when Helen says that she is, the trick-or-treater responds with, "I'm sorry, I hope you have a good night." And as the trick-or-treaters are leaving her house and returning to the street, she overhears one of them say to the other 2, "It's really sad they didn't let her out tonight. They never let her out." And when Helen hears this, she tries to run to the kids where she can question them, but by the time she gets to where they were, they've already gone. And this story honestly just, it made my heart drop. Like, I'm not a parent, but it put me in Helen's shoes, and I experienced her hurt and pain, and it was soul-shattering. It truly, truly was. And this story honestly has no gore, torture, or blood in it whatsoever. It's a story that is just based on psychological horror, and it also has a lot of context to it that adds to the depth that this story provides. And from what I've read, I understand that some people don't understand the context of this story, but when the trick-or-treaters are saying they're referring to the kidnappers. And when the trick-or-treaters are saying her, they're referring to Alice. So this lets me know these kids know where Alice is being held captive. And the only thing I really am not sure of is if these kids belong to the kidnappers or if they're neighbors or what. But they do know where she's being held captive. And it makes me wonder exactly what's being done to Alice, which I don't even want to think about that too much because there are probably so many horrific scenarios that are going on here. And I tend to think that maybe the kidnappers sent the kids to Helen's home just to torture her a little bit more by letting her know that her daughter is still alive. So I tend to think that there's so much to this story that's not even said, and it just allows the reader to fill in the blanks. So, in my opinion, I think that this is a perfect example of how less can be a whole lot more with some horror stories. Aside from that disturbing piece, my next favorite story was called Boo by Richard Lehman, which this is about a group of trick-or-treaters who are being chaperoned by an older teenager named Donna, and as they're out and about, they come across this old decrepit house, where story has it that back in the day, some kid by the name of Boo Ripley lived there, and after he murdered his parents, he and their cats ate their corpses. So because of the whole urban legend aspect, Donna and a few of the curious kids of her group decide to check out the house. And after they're done, they return to the street so they can continue trick-or-treating. Well, this is when Donna discovers that they've gained an additional trick-or-treater. And when she asks the stranger who he is and where he's from, he identifies himself as Killer Joe and says that he's from the creepy house that they just left. Well, against Donna's better judgment, the kids talk her into letting him trick-or-treat with them, so she gives in and they go on about their business, which, truth be it, everything about this turns out to be pretty good. Like, the kids are having a good time with him, they're laughing and joking, he's giving them playful punches on the shoulder, and he's patting them on the back when they get a lot of candy, so they're having a good old time. That is until they get to this old lady's house, and she cusses them out because they're trick-or-treating at too late of an hour, and while she's there calling them names and everything, Killer Joe pulls a hatchet from his coat and hacks her to death. And I shouldn't be laughing at that, but the way that the scene is constructed, there's totally some dark humor there to start with. And I totally did not expect some old lady to cuss out a group of kids. So I really enjoyed the whole melodramatic side that she provided. And with the humor, the gore, and the creepiness all coming together, it truly made for a fun Halloween story. Also, I really liked how it was told in a way that made me feel like I was sitting at a campfire hearing an urban legend. And this is the first time I've ever read Richard Lehman, which, because I love the story so very much, this will not be the last time I read him. So definitely expect for me to do some book reviews on him in the near future. Now, the last story that I really enjoyed was called Eyes by Charles L. Grant. And this focused on a man by the name of Ron and his mentally handicapped son by the name of Polly, which we discover that about 4 years prior to this story taking place, Ron had some anger issues that were left untreated. And on this one particular Halloween, Ron was carving a jack-o'-lantern, and it just so happened that Polly was the one who wanted to do the carving. But Ron wouldn't let him because the knife was sharp and he didn't want Polly to hurt himself. So because of this, Polly ends up throwing a tantrum and he accidentally destroys the jack-o'-lantern that Ron had just carved. So Ron is off to the side getting angrier by the moment, and Polly comes over and grabs the 2 triangles that Ron had cut out of the jack-o'-lantern to make its eyes. And Polly's holding the triangles up to his own eyes like this, just kind of walking around. And Ron comes up from behind and pushes him and causes him to stumble and hit face first into the corner of their dining room table. But by the angle that Polly falls, it causes the piece of pumpkin to gouge into his eye socket and into his brain, which, of course, this kills him. So after this tragedy, Polly's ghost returns every Halloween and forces Ron to run face first into the corner of their dining room table out of hopes that he will also gouge out his own eyeball. And he has to do this in repetition throughout the day and night of that holiday until he succeeds in gouging out his own eye. So this story was depressing as hell, but it's also something that I really enjoyed. It was something that felt original, and also at the same time I enjoyed the characters because no one in here felt evil. It just felt like typical human beings who had been dealt a shitty hand. And I think that the overall message of this story is, if you have anger issues, you need to get those checked out and you need to do something about it. If not for yourself, then for your loved ones. Because if not, you can make a mistake that you could not recover from. And in that case, you need to be sure that you're okay so you can be okay for the ones you love. So definitely, if you have anger issues, get them checked out. And with how much I love this story, I know for a fact that I'm going to be reading more Charles L. Grant. As a matter of fact, this was the first time I ever read him, and I know that I plan to read more of his books in the near future, so definitely look out for those reviews. And even though all I did was cover 3 stories in this segment, there were more stories that I enjoyed. It's just that I didn't want to do a video that was like 1 or 2 hours long, so I just narrowed it down to my top 3. Instead of me bitching about a particular character, I'm going to bitch about the story Buckets by F. Paul Wilson. And before I get started, I would just simply like to respectfully say that I'm not asking for your opinion on this topic, and if you do decide to comment and your comment is trollish, any type of trollish comment will be deleted. But this story is about a doctor who focuses on pregnancies and abortions. And as he's giving away candy to trick-or-treaters, he's noticing where a few of these kids are holding metal buckets. Which, it just so happens, these are the same buckets that he used in the past when giving abortions. Well, as the story fleshes out, we discover that these particular kids are the spirits of those abortions that he gave, and they have aged to the point of what they would have been had they lived. At this point, the story honestly becomes nothing more than a preaching platform, and it's one where the author uses this opportunity to shame women who have had abortions. And the shaming is so deep, he covers just about every topic out there. However, he very conveniently avoids the topics of if a woman was raped or if she was in poor health. So, because of the cold, matter-of-fact tone that this story was written in, I went online to see if the author's opinions really matched what was written in this story, and I couldn't find anything one way or another. But I did see where a few pro-life websites out there use this story as their holy grail. And since I'm a firm believer that a woman should have the right to choose, I really did not care for how this story went. It was just very cold-hearted, and I hate to think about how it would make some women feel who have read this and have had abortions in the past. So, because of the tone of this story and just how cold it all felt, I'm honestly not going to be reading this author anytime soon. With Halloween Horrors, I really enjoyed where the authors spoke about their fondest Halloween memories, and I found where 12 of the stories in this book were really outstanding, which all of that makes up more than half of this book. But at the same time, there were 7 stories that I felt were just okay, and then there were 3 stories that I thought were pretty boring, and there was 1 story that honestly was just written in poor taste and I couldn't get behind it. But with my top 5 favorite stories, I would have to include the ones I spoke about in the Story Behind the Story segment, and I would also include The Black Pumpkin by Dean Koontz, as well as Conversations in a Dead Language by Thomas Ligotti. Now, with The Black Pumpkin, this is back when Koontz was still edgy. This was when he was really focusing on horror suspense versus the stuff he's writing today where it feels like he's trying to write a book that Lifetime will pick up. And I really enjoyed this good throwback to Koontz, and I felt like the moral of the story was really good, which it focused on you get what you give. So that was really cool. And with Thomas Ligotti, I've been wanting to read him for a while now, which I just hadn't the opportunity to actually do it. But I was really impressed with his story because he crams years of information into this short story, and it doesn't seem rushed. It doesn't seem boring. It just seems very casual that all of this information comes together, and we see a man's life chronicled throughout multiple Halloweens. And what goes on in this story is very disturbing, but the author doesn't literally take us into the Chamber of Horrors by hand. He just lets us stand outside and make up our minds of what's going on. And this is mostly due to the open context of which he writes in. But I was really impressed with this story, and I will totally be reading more of him in the near future. Now, out of all the stories in this book, there are quite a few different stories where children are in danger or they're being murdered. So if those subjects trigger you, you might not want to read this book. But there are also stories in this book where parents are in danger as well, or just adults in general. But I would honestly say the stories aren't overtly graphic. There is one story, though, called Buckets by F. Paul Wilson that I just felt was in poor taste. And pretty much that one does kind of go over into the splatterpunk realm a little bit. But for the most part, the rest of the stories, they're pretty safe, and you just have to use your imagination on how gory the scene actually is. And overall, the book didn't scare me, but there was a few stories that did creep me out, and I did feel invested from beginning to end, where I honestly could not put this book down. To show y'all how much I loved Halloween Horrors, this is not a thin book whatsoever. And truth be it, when I read books of this size, I end up just reading them on my lunch break at work or when I'm lounging around the house. However, I enjoyed this book so much I took it with me wherever I went and read it whenever I had the opportunity. So yeah, it was fun to read and it did put me into the spirit of the season. And if you're wanting to buy a copy of this for yourself, just know that Halloween Horrors is out of print, so there's some pretty pricey copies available online. However, the other edition, which is October Dreams, is still available, and I don't believe it's as expensive as this edition. Now, if I were to buy this today, I would honestly not spend anything more than $30 on it, but personally, that's just me. And yes, I do highly recommend this book, so if you see a copy of this or October Dreams, definitely slam down your money for it if it is a reasonable price. On to the questions. My first question is, what is a horror book that was so good while you were reading it, you had to take it with you wherever you went? Load up the comments. My second question is, since Halloween is over, do you continue reading Halloween-themed books throughout the year, or do you just hold off on those until about the fall season? Why or why not? Personally, I use the year to collect Halloween-themed books, and when the fall season comes about, I start reading them to get into the spirit of the season, which, truth be it, I'll sometimes start in about August, which is when I'll start putting up my Halloween decorations in general. So yeah, that's just a personal preference of my own, but I would love to know what you like to do and why or why not. Now it's time for me to move on to this weekend's meme, which if you would like to contribute to the memes that I feature in my videos, all you have to do is befriend me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and whenever I post an image and ask you to caption it, all you have to do is just leave a caption, and the best one will receive a shout out here. As you may or may not know, I do have a fairly perverted sense of humor. So for that reason, I chose the meme of Welcome to Ass Eating 101, and this was contributed to the channel by the Faded Blue Dot via Instagram, and I would just like to say thank you for contributing this. It really did make me laugh, and thank you for watching. Now it's time to go in and close out the video, and before I do, I would like to say I'm sorry that this video is so late. My intention was to have it uploaded last weekend, but I was feeling under the weather and I was suffering from a lot of brain fog, so I had to redo quite a few different scenes in this video, and you'll notice that this video has a lot more cuts than my other ones do, which it's simply because I was just feeling bad and the medicines I was on would not allow me to focus. So I do apologize for that, but hopefully we're over that hump and I can get back on schedule now. And I would also like to say thank you to Lisa G and JL Mulvihill for contributing to my Patreon account. And if you're interested in young adult books that are fantasy or steampunk related, JL Mulvihill is a young adult author, and you can check out her books in print, ebook, and audio wherever books are sold. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account as well, for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if you have a profession that you would like for me to tie to your name, I will do that as well. Also, I do have another tier option where it's $10 a month. This will give you the shout out at the end of my videos, but also at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over a creepy photograph, which I do creepy photography on the side. And once you receive that photo, you can print it off, do whatever you want with it. But if you can contribute, that's awesome. If not, that's cool too. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. And if you would like to hunt me down on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are all available in the description section of this video. So be sure to hit me up and connect with me on those platforms. And without anything else left to say, I hope you have a wonderful week and sweet nightmares.